So I'm here in New York with Ben Schachter, who's an artist who lives and works in Pittsburgh and is a professor of art at Saint Vincent College. In Pittsburgh? Just outside?
It's just outside Pittsburgh.
Just outside of Pittsburgh. Yeah, good. It's so good to be talking to you today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I want to ask you a few questions. You're someone who has been thinking and writing and speaking about contemporary art in relation to Jewish practice and thought specifically, religious practice and thought more broadly, but I guess specifically Jewish. Would you talk about that? What are you working on? What does that look like? What questions are you asking?
I'm reading a lot of Jewish law. And the Jewish law that I read comes from Talmud, which is the oral tradition. And in that, there are rabbis and sages talking about space, private space, public space, how to run water so it's separate and remains proper for ritual baths. And these are really architectural questions. What's private, what's public, what's out on the street, what's in my house. And I think of those things in an artistic way, and I make pictures that I think of as architectural follies that play with those rabbinic ideas.
That is fantastic. And uncommon.
Uncommon.
Are you finding many people to have this conversation with?
What I found is when I point it out to them,
Yeah.
they go, right, they're talking about these contemporary ideas, but from thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And it suddenly makes sense to people when I put it in that framework.
And if art in general and contemporary art specifically is visual spatial thinking, then there are deep resources for visual and spatial thinking in the traditions of Jewish law, Jewish
That's right.
midrash.
That's right.
So the connection is rich, thick, but relatively underdeveloped. Would you say?
I would say so.
Yeah.
A more common approach is people will look at ritual objects and then look at the form of it, either decorated, or look at the action. And the book that I'm working on, Image, Action, and Idea in Contemporary Art, I look at the action first. And there are artists who look at the way you use something, and that's where they create the performance, or the body art, or the contemporary art using Jewish tradition.
Give me some examples. What kind of artists are you?
Well, there's
talking
a ritual object called a tefillin, or phylacteries. You wrap it around your arm, and it's this leather strap. And as you do that and you pray with it in the morning, it often leaves a mark on your skin temporarily. And an artist saw that mark, Ken Goldman, and he then impressed letters from the prayer into his arm with the strap. And so it was a doubling of the activity. In the prayer, it discusses cleaving to God, being bound to the divine, and then obviously at the end you remove yourself from that moment of connection. Another artist made that same strap, Arik Weiss. He made it with tape. And there's a real hesitancy. When I look at that photograph of this performance, I wonder what it feels like to remove oneself, to take off that strap. And so they really play with the actual experience as well as the material that they're using.
And in both cases, they're presenting this as artwork.
As artwork.
And as prayer. I mean, does it function as?
I haven't asked them specifically, but they do. Ken Goldman did say it's performance.
Yeah.
So because of that word, I assume there's a connection with daily practice. Although he doesn't use that, I'm sure. That artwork.
Yeah, sure. And so work like that, you're arguing, requires a kind of a double hermeneutic that you're interpreting it in the context, the grammars, the traditions of contemporary art making, modern and contemporary art making, but also there's another tradition that this has to be interpreted in.
Right.
That's
the artist knows those things, and the viewer who comes to the art with both of them, can interpret the work most richly. Yeah. In my work, I often find there are two audiences: the people who know the texts and the Jewish tradition, and the people who are comfortable in contemporary art galleries. Both of these can be a little, nerve-wracking, walking into a ceremony not knowing what's happening, or even a gallery with paintings and strange things on the floor. It can be, both settings can create a feeling of being ill-prepared. And for some art, that's a welcome beginning, because you have to be challenged into something. But in ordinary practice, being ill-prepared and feeling sort of unwelcome in religion can be off-putting.
Yes.
So I hope my work is a little bit, in between, a little friendly, a little, humorous at times, just like this. The tape on the arm is unusual, but maybe not, off-putting.
Yeah. Do you feel that, working in that space between those two audiences, those two traditions, do you feel that to be, like in your own experience, very difficult and demanding, or very sort of rich and generative, like it just feels big? Does that make sense? On an experiential level.
Sure.
Is there more frustration or...
As I'm working?
Yeah, and as you're talking to people who are talking about your work.
Well, as I'm working, I don't really think of it as expansive, unless I'm reading something, and then as I'm reading something, I sort of see it.
Yeah.
And that's when suddenly a new way of making work appears to me. I also made a series of paintings on the Eruv. And the Eruv is a boundary around a community that basically says we're all one family on the Sabbath. And the first map of these areas I ever saw was a map of Venice, Italy. And it just so happens 2 years before I had spent a summer there. And the map took me back to that place in my mind, and I made the map. And I found the people who respond to these paintings of maps respond to the ones where they've been before. So they become a personal connection, and then a new understanding of thinking about that place through Jewish tradition.
Yeah. And a new way of marking off the space.
Yeah, that's right.
That's maybe familiar to some, unfamiliar to others. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, good. Well, so when does your book come out?
Hopefully in the fall.
Okay, okay, good. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So to pan out a bit more broadly and look at a wider context that you're working in, that I'm working in, that this conversation is happening in, there has been a lot of discussion over the past 15, 20 years maybe about the return of religion to contemporary art, both among artists who are more willing, I think, more forthright about engaging religious subject matter, religious ideas, but also on the other hand, some people writing more directly about religion and contemporary art. So I'm interested what that looks like from your point of view.
Right.
Is there a return of religion occurring in contemporary art? And if so, what does that look like? Are there any kind of salient examples that come to mind?
So there are artists who are thinking about this question, and there are also some art historians who are also thinking about it. Samantha Baskin wrote a book, Jewish Artists in the Bible, and she's noticed that artists with significant reputations had a parallel body of work that illustrated or contended with the Bible in addition to their more famous work. There are groups of Jewish artists gathering in Chicago and Los Angeles and in New York who get together to study texts. And whether or not that adds to their work remains to be seen, but it's an activity that they work together.
So in the case of artists who have a parallel body of work, is that work being shown, being talked about outside of Baskin's?
That I don't know. That was
Yeah.
her work was more, her scholarship was more art historical.
Yeah.
But today I do find that there are some artists who have both.
Yeah.
And there are artists like me who really have decided just jump in and do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And see who's going to show it, how often it gets shown. Toby Kahn is another person who had a reputation, and his work sort of skirts the line between being contemporary art only and having religious connotation. Another person, Archie Rand, now has a huge body of work of Jewish images, but before that he was known for something else. So it's sort of a dance for some people. For me, I just focus on one.
Yeah.
And see where it goes.
Yeah. What do you think if the return of religion in contemporary art is happening among smaller communities, discrete individual artists? What part of that is most interesting to you?
Well, here's the unique thing about the Jewish aspect of this. When people study texts, read Torah, read Talmud, read the stories, they're interpreting. They're exploring something, and they call it learning. And when I make a work of art, or when these Jewish artists get together, they're also learning, but instead of adding text and word interpretation, they're adding a visual interpretation. And so now images and objects that we make become part of the story. And so we're adding to a community that's already there in the books, that's already there in the tradition, and it's broadening from those pages and from that tradition and ritual into discourse.
Yeah. And in that case, it's theology. I mean, it's visual theology.
One could really see it that way. Not everything that I've seen artists make really connects to it.
Sure.
So the definition of theology might have to be sort of a theopraxis. And looking at the laws. And when you perform the laws, or if you're an Orthodox person and you perform the laws, you might believe that by doing that you improve the world, or by doing that you come to know God. So I don't hold by those ideas, but I do think that when I make things, I am adding to a conversation.
That a conversation you would characterize as theological, or at least
Jewish.
Or Jewish. Yeah. Right, because that's the bigger
piece.
That includes theology.
Theology I think theology is maybe the core, but it's a part of Jewish tradition. It isn't the whole.
See that? Yeah, that's really interesting.
And I see that as different from other faith traditions.
Yeah, like Christianity.
Right.
I think depending on the sort of wing of Christianity that we might talk about, at least in Protestant Christianity, there has been such a displacement of practices and of liturgy and to some extent of tradition, artistic tradition, and everything else, so that the larger umbrella becomes theology in a way.
That's right. That's right.
And so maybe that's
it's reversed. It's completely reversed, because there's a tradition that says you follow the law and then you understand. And there's something very true about that. And even in my studio, and I know other artists who make, and they may make dozens of pictures in a series, and then they come to understand what it was they were doing. And then that understanding informs the next series. So I see a real connection between these ideas.
Protestants are relearning this. The same thing in the last few decades, I think, relearning the liturgical, practical body. We often, I think, call it theology, right? Practice theology or lived theology, right? Protestants, but relearning it, and I think Jews thinking well about this, talking well about this, have an enormous amount to teach Protestants and Christians of all stripes.
Good.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of which, if that's a point of common ground or conversation between Jews and Christians about religion and contemporary art, can you think of any others where the conversation, sort of interfaith conversation about religion and art, have been particularly productive, or there's potential, right? What do you want to talk to? Maybe I'll ask it this way. What do you want to talk to Christians or Buddhists or whoever about on the topic of art and religion?
I wanted to show that the Jewish idea of the laws isn't just in the practice inside the temple or inside the synagogue. They're daily, and sort of those daily things, when an artist gets a hold of them, suddenly we see them differently. Even for the Jewish community, it's a new way of looking at what it is to think about these things. There are some laws that not many people actually practice, but we study them anyway. And there's an artist, Andy Arnovitz, who made a dress for the Sota. The law discusses what to do with the woman who is accused of adultery. And it's this terrible law. And this artist has sympathy for this character by dressing her with this dress of paper and dirt and hair. It's not a law that anyone recognizes ever was applied, but we study it anyway, right? And the artist that is, used materials that she could feel and could sense to give us a new appreciation of that law. And there are things like this all throughout these texts. By looking beyond whatever theology is, at all of these other things that have been forgotten or not used, and thinking them as an artist might, we see them differently. Just like the Eruv, I see it differently. It's not just this boundary that we create in order to create community, just like Andy Arnovitz and just like Ken Goldman with the strap. It's not just a ritual we do blindly, but it's something that really affects the person. And sharing that, I think, is really...
Yeah. And you feel like artists working on this, on these topics, have something to contribute to Jewish thinking. I mean, this isn't just...
And there's a direct link.
Yeah.
It's not an open-ended spirituality or unclear theology.
Right.
It's I'm doing this, and you do this too. Look how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And we can talk about a specific idea together, either in words or in images. And then the next artist who makes a work about tefillin adds to that conversation.
See, that's, I think what's really good and very interesting about your answer to kind of interfaith dialogue is your answer was so specifically Jewish, right? And I think that's exactly right. Sometimes the impulse in interfaith conversations, particularly in a conversation that's so underdeveloped like religion and contemporary art, is to just distill down to the broadest thing that we can talk about. And then sometimes you end up not really talking about anything particular.
Right.
Whereas maybe interfaith conversations on these topics or others require specificity that we bring to the table, a kind of the fullness and particularity of our traditions as it applies to Jewish law and women caught in adultery or whatever. Yeah. And because that's where you perhaps really get a grip on the what I want to say theological world of the artist, but theopractical.
And that comes after.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
I don't start there.
Yeah.
I don't think, what is God? What is my relationship to God? I think first these very particular things. And through my lifetime, perhaps I'll come to a bigger understanding of something. We'll see.
Yeah. Good, as will we all. Right? So I wanna ask maybe a little bit more specifically how what we've just been talking about connects to the book or the main argument of the book.
Well, the book Image, Action, and Idea in Contemporary Art goes through those three things: image, action, and idea. And it moves away from images, which is sometimes a problematic issue in Jewish law. It's not as problematic as people think it is. Moving towards action, and there's a lot of action that we do. We've been talking about that already. And so even in contemporary art, since the 1960s, artists have moved away from thinking about the finished product and more to how you make something. Whether it's just rolling a tire across the floor or splattering paint, whatever the case may be. And thinking of art being made that way, and thinking about Judaism as full of action, the book brings those two things together. And that's really the heart of it.
Yeah. And the third, image,
an idea.
An idea. Are you talking conceptual art there specifically?
Right.
Yeah.
And just as I read the Talmud for laws about architecture and community spaces, it reads like a large conceptual artwork to me. Here are the laws on how to draw a line around your neighborhood, right? It's almost Sol LeWitt-like.
Yeah.
And so all three of those components are ways to think about contemporary art. And if you just bring in the Jewish content, it sort of is a natural glove in hand kind of book.
It strikes me that so many Jews, or at least people raised with a Jewish background, were so influential in contemporary art, including Sol LeWitt, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. And Joseph Kossuth and and all. So
and many of them will disavow it.
Yes, right.
So where did it come from? Was it subconscious?
Yeah.
Was it part of their upbringing?
Yeah.
I'll leave that to other art historians to
You're
wrestle
not,
with.
You're not going to mention that.
I'm not going to be the one to do that. I'm more interested in what's happening now moving forward.
Yeah. Eleanor Hartney talks about the Catholic imagination in contemporary art. Do you think there's a Jewish imagination in contemporary art that may or may not be connected to Jewish devotion?
I think there is, and most likely it would be best expressed in the same time period that she looked at. And then today we'll see how things are different.
Are you working on that?
No. I'm working on tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so you are working on tomorrow. Yours is not so much an art historical project.
No, it's not.
It's what can be made in the coming
That's
years.
right. And the theories that and the criticisms I'm developing, I even caution against in the book, looking back and calling something Jewish when it shouldn't be.
Oh, interesting.
But learning from it, taking it through a new lens, and then thinking about what might be made next.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Any specific things you're working on? What that looks like in the coming years for you?
It's waiting for this book to come out and see
Yeah.
what the responses are at this point.
Yeah.
But I do have artwork in the hopper, and hopefully I'll be in an exhibition,
Yeah.
several exhibitions in the coming months.
Well, and you're a strange bird in that way, a writing artist, an artist who's making and exhibiting work and publishing. What would you consider? It's art theory, art.
This is art theory, art criticism.
Yeah, art criticism. What is it? How do you think about your practice working between those two spheres, writing and making? Are those a single practice? Are they two different practices?
They're closer. They're closer than our disciplines allow.
Yeah.
But to spend the time focusing on one or the other makes each of them better.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a rhythm. It's a dance between the two. My work is very conceptual and it deals with ideas. So stepping back from it and writing about someone else's ideas isn't too much of a stretch.
Would you say that these are different languages or grammars or
I would more say it's different audiences.
different audiences?
You have to speak to the audience.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so the more plainly you can speak to each audience, the better. So
Yeah.
the person who reads the book is either already a theorist or someone who has some background in art,
Yeah.
and I have to speak to them, or the person coming into the gallery, I have to make work in a way that invites them to spend some more time.
With regard to religion and religious thought, or more specifically Jewish thought, do you find that one of those audiences has a more developed conversation going on already?
The people coming in with religion or
Yeah.
background in Judaism or not?
Yeah, I mean that you're making work that is specifically wrestling
Yeah.
with Jewish meanings.
Yeah.
Do you find that you get more traction with the work or with the writing?
More with the work, because it's been out there more.
Yeah.
And it's there's a little less commitment to someone coming into a gallery and looking at a painting rather than going through 150 pages.
150 pages sounds blessedly concise in terms of contemporary art theory.
It's my goal.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm really looking forward to the book, and I really enjoyed talking to you
Thank you so
today.
much for having me.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
great.